If that's a giant leap or if that's a baby step, that's progress. If we do something, we try something and it's mostly wrong, but we learned one thing, that's progress, and we need to celebrate that and continue to move forward.
You're listening to Being Built. I'm Aaron Davis, founder of Reliant Search Group. I'm here with Stacie Hoelscher. You're the director of digital transformation
Yes.
at UDRI.
Yes.
University of Dayton Research Institute. Sounds very sophisticated.
That's what I try to do.
We were just talking before we started recording about how even these sophisticated things, a lot of it comes down to emotion and people and getting the right people kind of inspired and aligned the right way, right?
Yep.
I first got acquainted with you when you were working as a chief operating officer of a software services consulting software development firm.
Yep.
So you've got kind of a background in professional services world.
Yeah, mostly like operations processes. I'm not the technical guru, but if you want to create a process or a system, that is where I play.
Okay.
Details and how it works in the real world.
Are you the person that should be like proofreading my
Yes.
research papers and stuff?
Yes.
Because you pay attention
I
to those
will
details.
let you know if you have 2 spaces in between words or just one.
You know what's funny is I was a COO at a similar company, I think similar size, and I'm not exceptionally great at detail. But what I was really attentive to was the business development and the recruitment parts of the business, and kind of growing and improving those processes and those operations. So I guess operations could mean a lot of different things.
It really can. It's kind of the grab bag of everything. So if it doesn't fall into a specific bucket, it's operations.
Yeah. If
So
you're
it
not
could
the
be
CEO
anything.
on the, you're out there doing the public appearances and whatever, you're doing the dirty work,
Yeah.
whatever that dirty work is.
Whatever he doesn't want to do or she doesn't want to do, that's your job.
Right. That's you, right?
Yeah.
That's cool. So tell me about, like, how did you get into this field and into the tech world?
So kind of by happenstance, I have been a project program manager. That has really been where I kind of found my career. And I was more in the marketing spaces.
Oh, really?
So I worked in Cincinnati. I worked for a little
like your
agency.
Your first grown-up job was in marketing?
My first grown-up job was running an apartment complex. And that is something I will never do again.
Oh, yeah. I've worked in that space. It's hard.
It's terrible.
Yeah. It's a lot of hard work for a lot of ungrateful stakeholders.
Yeah. So I'll never do that again. But then I moved to Cincinnati and worked at a marketing agency.
Okay.
And that was really a wonderful experience because it was marketing, which was what my degree is in.
Okay.
But then project management, which is what I found my skill set was in.
Yeah.
That what to me was almost a surprise because that's not something I think you can study in school now, but at the time when I was in, that wasn't a thing.
Yeah. Sales is the same thing. Like I kind of ended up getting into a career in sales recruiting kind of stuff. Nobody majored in sales when I was young. Right?
Yeah.
Now they do.
Yeah. It's business.
Yeah.
And just figure it out.
Yeah.
So then once I got there and it was like, oh, processes and oh, details and oh, let's think through how this is going to, this plan someone has is really going to impact the real world. And I just found that I had a natural skill set to be like, well, wait a minute. You think it's going to run like this, but let's just think about how people operate. That's not going to work. What are we going to do? How are we going to create a process that has a step in it that's just, well, people just need to remember to do X, Y, Z. That's never going to work.
Right.
What is going to be their trigger? And we've got to figure that out.
Yeah. Sounds like you're sensitive to like user experience kind of stuff. It reminds me of the whole push, pull door concept where if somebody pushes on a pull door, we like to laugh at them as if they've messed up, but really the designer of the door messed up, right? Because if it doesn't look like, or the handle's not situated in such a way,
it should be known right
it's
away.
not obvious, then whoever hung that door, designed that door, messed it up.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly.
So you got kind of the X's and O's, attention to detail analyst kind of mentality.
Yes.
Okay.
My natural inclination is to be super methodical and detailed and organized and all of those type A things that are just kind of boring. But
it's not boring to the people who get to enjoy the trip that you prepare for, right?
Right.
I'm very much I think my wife and I are both this way, but we're kind of just like, okay, let's just go. Let's take a trip and let's see what's the cheapest flight we can catch tomorrow or whatever. Like we need a credit card, couple of bucks, driver's license. So we both kind of go in, and then you you figure out you're missing something along the way or whatever. You can get away with that sometimes, but when you're running a business, you can't.
No,
You know,
no. I was going to say you can't do that with kids very well either.
no, you can definitely screw up your trips, but yeah, not great. But you're the kind of person who will prepare and make sure you've got the sunscreen.
That's what I'll have the plan. I'll know all the flight details and all of the things that we're going to do to get there. And then once I'm there, I'm done.
So who told you to major in marketing?
It was just like, I knew I wanted to do business.
Okay.
I wasn't an engineer. I wasn't an accountant. Like that just wasn't where I had any passion at all. Sort of some interest in marketing. And so it was, let's go see what that's like. I ended up actually double majoring in marketing and logistics, which kind of was I like the marketing aspect appeals to me, but the logistical components, like that appeals to my skill set.
Yeah. It's a tactical, analytical.
Right. It's all about the details.
Yeah. So you kind of got into the project management side of marketing stuff, right? And realized that you were a detail oriented, tactical analyst kind of person, right?
And then that's just where my career went. So from there, we wanted to move north and closer to family. So I got a new job as a program manager for a brand new startup, trying to figure out, hey, we're starting things. We need to figure out processes. And I was like, great. I would love to. I could build you a checklist like none other. That company ended up not being successful. So I found myself laid off looking for a job. And that's when I got into the DoD contracting space. Okay. So that was really, looking back, such a blessing to get into that space, especially in Dayton. There's so much. It's a big part of what we do.
It's a quarter of what I do, really.
Yeah.
Probably 20 to 25% of my customers are contractors, DoD contractors.
Yeah. It's
big part of our economy.
Yeah, it's super important. And so then I got an opportunity to really learn what the heck that means, because it is a very different world to operate in than the commercial space. There's so much contracts and language and processes and how things work. It just is different.
So how'd you get into that?
So I answered an ad and got a job.
Yeah. Okay.
It was funny because I was laid off, so I was really looking for a job. This was a job in the DoD space, which I didn't know anything about, but it was about processes and organization, still in my skill set. And I got offered the job on a Friday, and they said, "Can you start on Monday?" And I was like, "You better believe I can."
Nice.
But then on Monday, I had been going through the interview process with other companies. One was a marketing company, not in the DoD space at all. Okay. And so I called them to say, like, "Hey, I'm sorry, I have to bow out. I've taken another job." And they're like, "No, we were going to give you an offer." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, if that had come through, I probably would have taken it. And then my career would be in a completely different spot. I would not have landed. I would not have been a COO. I would not be in the position I am in now. I wouldn't have the knowledge network that I have. And I don't know where I would be, but I'm really grateful for the path that I've landed in."
You ever wonder, like, how different would my life be? And just like any random relationship you have, like your relationship with a sibling or something.
Yes.
Like, how different would my relationship with my dad be, or whatever random thing you want to, connect or, analyze, or what? How different would that be if I had taken that job instead of that job?
I think the most powerful position that any human can have is whoever decides in colleges who dorms with whom.
Oh, wow. That's a big one too. Yeah. Because then you become best friends, right?
All of my friends. I can trace my relation. My husband, we met through connections with how people lived in dorm rooms in college. And I'm like, that impacted my entire social life.
I didn't have that experience with roommates in college. I had some best friends, one in particular who passed away recently, but who was a real mentor to me. And I really kind of regret not staying closer with him. But I didn't keep up with anybody in college. I went to college out of state. So I guess that's a factor. Did you go to college here locally?
Ohio State.
Oh, okay. So you're not too far from a lot of the folks you went to school with are probably local, right?
Yep.
Or close-ish. Yeah. But I got a few BFFs that I've never talked to, and then we get together every once in a while. We're still BFFs.
Yeah.
I had this kind of relationship. But I know what you mean, though. It's like those that random little connection or whatever changes everything.
Everything. And you have no idea at the time. It's only by looking back to say, whoa, look where that led and where that led and where that led. I was thinking on my way here actually about, kind of thinking about my career path and going back to that moment when I got laid off from that organization. And at the time, it was obviously really hard. I have a family. We had just moved. It was all these things. But if that hadn't happened, my career would have taken a completely different path. And I have had so many wonderful experiences, and I've met so many wonderful people who have shaped my life that I'm so grateful.
When it turns out great, it's hard to look back and say anything shouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
Right. Like I know what you mean, because I've had disappointing employment experiences before, and at the time it was just like devastating. I take it personally.
Yeah.
I take if a customer doesn't work with me anymore, like, why you don't like me? I'm ugly, right? Like, I take it personally, and it is personal. I feel like
because it's all about people.
That's what that's exactly what it is. That's almost all it is, right? Even if it's about the X's and O's and the brand and the the capabilities and whatever, it's just a bunch of people that did that. Even if it's about the engineering and the tech and the features, it's still just a few people to put that together, right? So it really comes down to
decided to work together.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yes, I do take it personally, but when I look back on those things, they hurt at the moment. But yeah, when it turns out good, it's easier to look back on those hurts and appreciate them.
I think you just have to keep going until it turns out good.
Are you getting any better at appreciating the hurts in real time?
Yeah, I think so. So I recently went through, I've been with UDRI only since August.
Okay.
So I went through a transition last year, and it was hard. I cried a lot of tears.
Yeah.
But it was always with like, I'm going to be okay.
Yeah.
This is going to be okay.
Because you've been through that before.
It's going to work out, but it's going to work out, and it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And that's it. It just was known.
Yeah.
It'll be
it's like
whatever
chapter 12
it
in
will be.
a 30 chapter book, right? So it's peaks and valleys or whatever. This is just a little transition period.
And I mean, jobs are they're important. I care about them, but it's a job, right? You can find another one, and you will.
When you were saying about the importance of the people, the relationships or whatever, it made me think about my work. I get super biased by knowing how much. So I hire people more or less, right? I hire, and I work in a field where hiring one person, I get to put a lot of time and attention into it, right? Because they're usually really critical, hard to find people or whatever. That's a real valuable hire. But I'm super biased by knowing that those people are going to like each other, that they're going to energize each other.
Yeah.
And most people would probably, I can't lead with that. I don't say that on my website. But most people would think, oh, you match skills to whatever, but it's all that's important. It's not, you can't ignore that.
Yeah.
But I get particularly energized and interested when I know that Stacie's going to like Bill's going to like Dan, going to like Sally or whatever, right? Like, because there's, when you just like and you're disarmed and it's easy, like there's a certain, you get extra energy and it's for free.
Yeah. But
your own energy is better.
That's when you're going to create something great.
Yeah.
And I mean, you've been in those situations, I'm sure, where you've got somebody who's got all those skills. They're the best in the field. They're great, but they don't get along. They're not the right fit. Right. That's not the right fit. Even if the skills are there, you've got to have it all.
Have you ever turned that corner with somebody that you had have you ever had like a work relationship that was just nothing but conflict, disappointment, frustration that turned great?
Yes.
Have you?
Yes.
Tell me about it.
I was completely turned off by this person. Like our personalities were very different.
Okay.
I'm not aggressive. I'm not into conflict, and I kind of I'm not the first to voice my opinion.
Okay.
So we have somebody join the organization, and they're very different. They're out there, and they're just putting it out there, and it doesn't really matter what kind of feathers they ruffle. And I
like them already.
No, I was like, oh my gosh, who is this person and what are they doing?
I'm sorry, Stacie. That's me, actually. No, it wasn't really me.
It was not.
But I know the personality. I know.
Yeah. And I projected, I can say this looking back, like I projected a lot of my own insecurities into kind of what he was putting out there, and I just didn't like it. But the way things changed was one-on-one conversation. Let me get to know you, let you get to know me. Let's have a real conversation. And finding I'm making stuff up and putting it on you. And there's something to just being heard and saying, here's where I'm coming from. Here's the experiences I've had. And letting the other person do the same. And now it's not who's this person. It's, oh, that's Joe or whoever. You know what I mean?
From.
Yeah.
That's why that makes sense to you.
Right. And I can put that, I just know more about you. I can tie things together, and it completely changed the nature of the relationship.
Did you guys keep working together for a time after that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, I like people that I worked with, I was, their leader coaching through, and they would come to me with similar experiences like, oh, I don't know how to work with this person. That was always my advice. Well, put all of that aside, have a one-on-one conversation. See if you'll go to lunch together. Have a coffee. Just start talking about just to get to know each other. See where you're coming from, and just start there. It doesn't have to be about work for a minute. It's about people.
I asked an employee once, have you ever had a meal with him?
Yeah.
We had this guy that was kind of abrasive, and that's not even fair. He wasn't abrasive. He just didn't care about, he wasn't a rule follower. So I think some people judged him as a little reckless or whatever. He wasn't reckless. He was focused on the goal, the purpose of the rules, not the rules themselves. He was indifferent to the rules. And so I respected him for that. He was a go-getter, but he was not a rule follower. He didn't know the processes. He didn't even, much less follow them. You know what I mean? He didn't know the policy, much less follow them, He knew the policy to get his invoices paid. Or
yeah. I can know how to work with the policy and the loopholes.
That's right. That's right. He was a how do you get around and get it done kind of person or whatever. And I think it was upsetting to a lot of folks who were more process oriented and maybe were more the governors type, which you need. It's weird sometimes in an organization. You really need both biases. But you do need people to most of the time, or in my experience anyway, you need people to be able to compromise and agree on consistently doing some middle ground, or we'll do it your way for this and our way for that, or whatever. But I remember people would come tattling, and I would say, "Have you ever had a meal with them?" And there's something happens, when you just give a shit about somebody's life and their family and their goals and their interests and their what sports teams they like or whatever they're into, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Because
Star Trek or whatever it is, right? Like when you learn them, it changes things.
Right. They're multifaceted, but you just know this one facet.
Yeah.
You've got to learn the rest. And then all of a sudden you can be like, oh,
you're just like my brother. That's right. That's right. Things you tolerate from your siblings or whatever you don't tolerate from coworkers. And then all of a sudden you're like, you're just like this person I love.
You're right.
I mean? Yeah. I wonder how much of conflict just comes from us just jumping to conclusions. You ever read the book from Malcolm Gladwell? Wrote a book called Blink. It's like this thin. It's a super short book. It's all about instincts and how people make snap decisions about other people. But it's an interesting read with regard to that subject.
Yeah.
Couple of maybe 3 or 4 concepts in there that were really insightful, research based stuff, but a good book. I'll send it to you when we're done. But it was real interesting ideas about how people make snap decisions, and they're all kind of primal. These are hardwired kind of behaviors that we have in order to safeguard ourselves or whatever, and really just to kind of reduce the effort necessary to make a decision make, right? And so we liken one person to another person that was similar, and in so doing often just, that's
make assumptions.
It's the basis of racism and sexism and all those things. So you get these huge categories and you just put people in huge categories, and most of us are smart enough not to do that too much. But Gladwell makes the point that like everybody does actually.
Yeah.
And you just have to mitigate it.
Yeah.
Right? It's
be aware of it, right?
Yeah, it's a natural tendency for us to categorize a tall person is like this, a short person is like that. Anyway, I think we do that to each other sometimes in work relationships. Take a person and make them like Steve, the guy we used to work with, or whatever. Right?
This is why you can't name your kids somebody who you don't
You don't
really
like,
like.
right?
You can't use that name.
True. My sister, my younger brother died last year, and my youngest sister, who's a couple of years younger than him, they grew up super close because there's a bunch of us. I was the oldest or whatever, so I wasn't near the same age as them, but she was closest to him, had a kid, and then like literally asked permission to everybody in the family. I want to name his middle name after our brother. And I think she did that for that reason. She's like, are you cool with like saying his name and thinking about our brother all the time? And I thought that was really thoughtful of her.
Yeah, really.
You know, because that takes a certain depth or whatever to know that that's going to trigger emotions every single time people engage in. We all said yes. We all said, yeah, we'll cry with you, whatever.
Yeah. Well,
and we'll still love them and hug them, and it'll be great. But it's a great way to reflect, right? Yeah, I mean, I think you made a good point there. You don't name your kids people you don't like.
Yeah.
Somebody shows up to the workplace with the name of a friend you don't like, or some old friend you don't.
It was really challenging. My husband was a teacher, so there was lots of names.
All the names.
I really love that name. Well, I had a student. I tell you, I'm not going to name that.
Is he still a teacher?
No. He left teaching in 2020.
Oh, wow.
It was a tough time for teachers.
I would have too. Man, I dodged a bullet, Stacie. So I dodged 2 during COVID. So I had a daughter who was a senior. She didn't dodge it. She had a horrible, really disappointing senior year. You know, no prom and all this stuff, right? She was like in a very competitive color guard program that like competed at nationals and everything, and they had to video record their performance and mail. It was horrible. She totally got robbed. But anyway, where I got really lucky is that I was already working from home. I didn't have any, commercial real estate or a team that had to figure out. I had been in leading teams.
Yeah.
Right up until like months before this happened. And I started a solo, like a firm, just myself, whatever, working from home.
Yeah.
So I dodged all of the burden and stress and responsibility that every other leader of my like seniority and experience had to deal with, just because I happened to luckily kind of move right before
just
then.
At the right time.
And my son was like right before going into elementary school.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm watching all these other parents who are figuring out like how to have to go to the office and not go to the office, or manage teams who are figuring out how to be remote and still get customers and still do sales without your networking events and all this stuff. And getting their 9 and 10-year-olds like schoolwork done. Yeah. That was hell.
Yeah.
So
it's such a time.
I feel very fortunate.
Yep.
But, your poor husband.
I know. It worked out okay. He got a new career and is loving it. So
that's cool. So let's talk about your career. You are now running digital transformation at University of Dayton Research Institute.
Yep.
What are you working on? What's your big objective here?
Yeah. So I run the Digital Transformation Center, which is a brand new initiative. It's a physical space that is designed to bring together government, academia, and industry to collaborate and work together in the name of advancing digital transformation, new capabilities, innovations for the Air Force.
Okay.
So we're working very specifically on bringing together those people to come together in a physical space for a specific reason, and seeing what will come when we're innovating together and being collaborative. Because digital transformation is, it touches every area of business. It can mean a million different things.
True.
But it's a super critical topic for the Air Force. We've got to move faster. We've got to get new capabilities to the warfighter much faster, because we've got to be competitive in a global environment. And it's critical. We've got to act now, and we've got to do things differently. We've created a world where there's so much bureaucracy that things are so slow, years in the making before they're real. And by the time in the technical landscape, it's obsolete. Like we waited so long to get there. Right. And so we've got to work better and faster, and we've got to really break some rules and think differently. And we're going to do that, we believe, by having really smart innovators in this space come together and think differently and work together and collaborate. So that's what the center's all about, bringing folks together And then working on a workforce development component as well, because we're all well aware, like in order to make digital transformation real, we've got to have people who are skilled, and we've got to be focused on getting folks skilled in the right things, that the tools and technologies that we need. And we need to open up that landscape to more than your traditional student. Yes, we want to bring traditional students into our area, but there are other people who will be great in make wonderful contributions in some of the capabilities that we need that aren't thinking about it.
Yeah.
Don't know it exists. It's some digital transformation. That's some other word that doesn't mean anything yet.
Yeah.
So we're hoping through the Digital Transformation Center that we can bring students into our space, or people who might become students one day, and see what we're talking about in real life, see how this works, how it is applied, what this means, provide them the tools to learn it, and hopefully energize folks to get into the space and build their career.
What if Bach never had a piano?
Right,
right.
right.
When I'm thinking about the unconventional,
right.
Talent or whatever, I think about that sometimes. What if Mozart never had a piano?
Right.
Right.
And
Not
that's
everybody does.
how
right?
exactly. I think there's so much talent that just, it's not, the tools aren't accessible. The training isn't accessible. They haven't had the role model path forward. It's not an easy path. How can we remove some barriers to get those folks involved? Because we need them. Industry needs them. Government needs them. And that's only going to get increase as we go forward.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by that. Like how you find that genius who will never know that they are, or is it threatened to never know that they're a genius, right? And I guess there are geniuses, but we're really not even talking about geniuses. We're just talking about capable, intelligent people, productive, intelligent, intrigued by mathematics and science, and being able to create high impact capabilities, right? So you don't have to be you might have to have an above average intelligence to do that, but not a genius.
Yeah.
How many above average people are selling sneakers?
Right.
How many above average intelligence people are, working in a retail job or whatever else? And I identify with that a lot, because I can, I have my like Dr. Phil moments or whatever that I can look back on and know that like that transaction happened. That person said, "Hey, Aaron, you should go to college." And then that person said, "Oh, you would be really good at this." And I had no idea this existed. Right. So I'm one of those kids, right, that kind of lucked out as a kid, and then as a college student, and then as a young person. I almost said young professional, but I wasn't yet. Right. So I get that. I totally get that. I'm no genius, but I am a capable, impactful person or whatever, who wouldn't have been able to be such had it not been for a couple of people looking for it, going out of their way, right? Looking for talent, right? And man, that's tricky.
Yeah.
It is hard to do. But I also heard you talk about the physical space thing. So that kind of takes me back to this COVID stuff that provoked a lot of, what is now an expectation that everybody's going to work from home. And I'm a big fan of companies that are smart about letting people work from home, but not for the reasons most people think. I will not get on the bandwagon that it's more productive for people to work from home. I don't believe it at all. I think it might be more productive for that individual in their lives and in the entirety of their lives. And they might still be very productive at work, like way more value created than spent on them, right?
Yeah.
I do believe that. I just think, given that, it's in demand, right? Like the in-demand workforce says, like, no, like we can do both, right? Like we can come to the office a couple days a week and still kill it, working from home 2, 3, 4 days a week, 5 days a week, sometimes, whatever. I think you just have to respect the fact that the in-demand, capable, highly intelligent, highly productive workforce is capable of doing it from home.
Yeah.
So I think it's more about supply and demand, right? Than it is about like, but I do believe that some magic happens when you're in a space together. Not because of the space, it's just because of the nature of the relationship.
I was going to use that exact same phrasing.
Okay.
There's something magic happens when people are in a room together.
Yeah.
And I can tell you just from the last 6 months that I have been working for UDRI and working on this Digital Transformation Center initiative, I've seen it happen in real time where you bring people together for a reason, and then you have no idea what's going to come of it. But I mean, I can personally have examples of conversations that I've been a part of at the Digital Transformation Center with folks that would never have been in the same room together. Certainly never in a virtual environment would we be having a conversation. Yeah. And we're all of a sudden ideating on different events that we can hold at the Digital Transformation Center to bring students into the environment. Yeah. Or a different event that we could hold, and how valuable it would be if we've got this person in the room and this person in the room and we're talking about this subject. Is a get to know you conversation. Hi, my name is Stacie. And all of a sudden now we're really ideating on an event that we could host and the value that it would create. And that would not have happened. I cannot imagine a situation where that would have happened in a virtual environment.
Right. The water cooler app or whatever.
Right. It's just different.
It sure is.
And we want to be very purposeful about it because we have a real mission. But I think there is so much that can come from getting some smart people in a room, people who are willing to collaborate and innovate. They want to work together. They're passionate about, we've got to move faster. We've got to be using technology in new ways to advance capability. And now is the time to do it. And we get those people in a room. My goodness, we can come up with who I can't even imagine, but I'm excited to see it.
So speaking of super innovative people in a room together, you've been in a few rooms with some smart people. So I suspect you've been able to, I don't know, are you a fan of sci-fi? I watch some sci-fi.
No.
Anyway, you get enough of it at work, right?
I've learned.
Anyway, I'm a big fanboy, right? Like I'm untechnical enough to still fanboy over the actual work stuff that my friends and colleagues and customers do, that I can look at it and gawk like a sci-fi fan. You know, if I knew it too well, like I used to be in the Army, right? So when I watch a military movie, I'm like,
that's not right.
What's that haircut? Come on. That's not how you wear that.
That would never be
rank
allowed
on your shirt or whatever, right? Like, that's not real. What are those boots? Where'd they get those? You know, so I'm not technical enough to do that.
Right. So you can just enjoy it.
Yeah, that's right. I can totally fanboy over my technical friends and leaders and whatever, over what they're doing. Like it's magic, you know, because I don't know it well enough to be otherwise. But anyway, I began to ask, as a person who is privy to a lot of these kind of, leading edge and forward thinking people and conversations, and you've seen the sparks fly. So for you, like, what has that provoked in your vision for what could be 20 years from now? Like, what do you imagine? What do you think is the biggest surprise that's going to happen to us in in our future, when we're grandparents?
Oh my gosh.
What is the tech landscape going to look like to the average person? Do you have any?
I don't even think we can imagine it now. I mean, I think it's going to be so different from just think about what AI has done. Think about ChatGPT for a second. Yeah. That was something I certainly could never have imagined.
Of the world last year.
Yeah. And I mean, I use it all the time. It's phenomenal, but I would never have imagined it. And so I think 20 years from now, we will have 3 different iterations of that.
Yeah.
Who knows?
True. In the 80s, we weren't thinking about the internet. Like
right.
I was like in elementary school in the 80s, right? Yeah. I have to lose track of sometimes how old I am. But I was in elementary school in the 80s. And so we played around with a mouse and like some real basic green screen kind of, write a line of code to make a cursor draw a triangle or whatever.
Look how cool this is.
Yeah. And they like put a phone on a thing to like show us the earliest version of the internet. We're like, oh, they're passing a signal. And it was literally passing ones and zeros back and forth. It was pretty worthless, but somebody was pretty proud of it. And I'm like, okay, whatever. None of us were impressed with it at the time because we didn't realize what it was. Yeah. It was a building block for something. We weren't old enough to appreciate the building block that it was, right? The grownups knew what they were doing. But I was just experiencing, like I still couldn't imagine a world in which I had no ability, no point of reference to be able to imagine the internet.
Right.
We had encyclopedias on the bottom shelf of a bookshelf in our basement or whatever, our lower level. And it's just, that's where we went to get our information, or we would ask grandpa. Right. So, And neither one of them were 100% right. Some books in grandpa's more than others, right? But yeah, you make a really good point, because we did not, the non-technical people who didn't understand what was being built with that early internet connection or whatever, had no idea to imagine. They had no basis for imagining,
But
the advent of the internet in everybody's hand.
when you
right?
think about, like, somebody did have that vision and that dream,
Yeah.
and people didn't create this all alone. It's that person talked to somebody else who said, you know what, that's really cool. And what else? What if we did this too? And then they talked to somebody else who said, I could add this. I know about this. And that's what we're trying to create, is that kind of environment where we've got some smart innovators thinking and talking and saying, here's what my idea is. And we have somebody else in the room saying, you know what, that's really cool, but what if we did this too? And I've got this capability. What if we added that in? What could that do? And this whole like, what if? What if? What could happen?
Yeah, I heard you say what if 1,000 times there, and that's where it starts, right?
Yeah, that's the dream, and that's how innovation happens.
True. Yeah, and I think you need somebody in the room. So if the engineer who created the ability of, putting the phone on the whatever receiver to get that computer to talk to some server elsewhere, if the engineer who made that, while I was a 9-year-old or whatever, watching that happen, was trying to tell me about that, I'm like, whatever, He-Man, like G.I. Joe, those were my interests, right? I was the wrong audience. I wasn't going to what if that, right? I didn't have the next level. I didn't even appreciate what was going on well enough to be able to contribute the what if. Oh, and, but, like, I didn't have that kind of energy to give to it. But somebody did, obviously, because some things happened, right? So somebody did. So, I just had I had an aha moment there as you were explaining that, how important it is to have people who understand some level of the complexity of an innovation or an idea or an accessible capability in order to be able to bring their unique kind of expertise and bias to it.
And then I think there's another component where, great, we can have this wonderful, cool idea. We've also then got to bring in the folks that are kind of more like me and like, okay, but how's this really going to work? What's that process going to look like? How do we get that from an idea into something real? But we also need that to be with people who aren't, there are people who are like that, who are, nope, you can't do it because of this. You can't do it because of that. That's not helpful.
Yeah.
How could we change the process? How could we change the culture? How could we change something to actually make that happen? And those are innovators in a very different way. Right. We need those people too.
True. Yeah. We don't need the people to point out barriers. We need barrier breakers.
Yes.
They're like, oh, we're going to run into this. Let me go get the plow.
Exactly. Right? You can find the barrier, but it's not a barrier. It's just a stumbling block.
That's right.
Let's hop over it and keep moving.
Yeah. You have been a part of now a couple of senior leader in a couple of very innovative organizations. What are some things that you do that might seem unconventional or not obvious in order to encourage innovation, all while being the pragmatic person who knows that the bottom line matters, right? Like, how do you balance that? What are things that you do? And like, what's your experience been dealing with encouraging innovation and getting good results?
Yeah.
Right?
I'm able to, or have been able to, work with some of those really big thinker, strategic folks who are always making connections and learn from what they're doing. I think a good example of that is my tendency is to be methodical, and I want perfection, and it should be perfect, and we're going to figure out all the details and then we'll act. And that is not how big thinkers tend to work. They're more, we got to go and we got to run. And I think I've been trying to take some more of that attitude in, it doesn't have to be perfect. We wait for perfect. It's not perfect anymore. We waited too long. We missed the boat. So encouraging more in myself and then with my team of just like, let's just try. Let's just go. Let's figure out enough that we can make progress. And then we'll learn from that. And that's okay. But you've got to create a space where that really is okay. Because people say that and then it's not really okay. So you really have to create an environment And that's with the people around you who are encouraging progress.
Yeah.
So if that's a giant leap or if that's a baby step, that's progress. If we do something, we try something and it's mostly wrong, but we learned one thing, that's progress. And we need to celebrate that and continue to move forward. And I think that for me, that has been a really tough lesson to learn because it's just not my natural tendency.
Mhm.
But where I am in this space now, like I'm all about it. Like we just have to go. Pick something and try. We've got to make progress. And whatever that looks like, little or big.
I had a colleague the other day that asked me kind of permission for something. I didn't feel needed permission, because I was like, oh, whatever, go blow it up. It doesn't, what's the worst that can happen? So I literally said that. What's the worst that could happen? And I think injecting that question and that attitude into it. So that question and that attitude is very dismissive to anything for which the worst that can happen is small. Right. And so like, we don't need to analyze experiments where it's just a puff of smoke and everything's fine. Right. When the answer to the, I think encouraging that attitude and that question is also good, because when the consequence, the worst that can happen, is bigger, like we have an explosion in the lab and it blows a couple windows out, then we've envisioned and analyzed and forecasted the cost of that. Right. Like, okay, well, is that worth the potential outcome? A couple of windows, got to replace a countertop or whatever. Sure, we could risk that explosion. Let's do it. Right. I don't really blow anything up in the lab, but it's just dollars and cents, ad spend, whatever. Same principles apply. But what's the worst that can happen? I think is a great question and a great framework of thought. And I also, as you were talking about progress, and it occurred to me that I heard from an unexpected voice, a finance leader. I think he's our CFO. No, he's our VP of finance at a large company I work with. Was the first person I heard say, perfection is the enemy of progress. And to hear that come from a finance executive, right, who is very much about the details and very analytical thinker, but he had matured in his career and knew that, like, if I'm too precise about everything, I'm too careful, I'm too cautious, I'm too formulary about everything, we're not going to get the unexpected big wins because somebody is having a, eureka moment. That's hard to measure, And so he was a wise guy. And I heard it from him, not a wise guy as in gangster, but like a wise guy. He was a wise person. But he was the first person that I heard that term from, or that saying from, and it stuck with me, because it really is, man. Like, you just have to just go, like you said, 10 times, just go and just see what happens. Right.
And I just think, like, I am 5 years ago, less than that, like, I would not have been the person who said that ever. I would have been like, well, I don't know. Let's think it through.
Yeah.
I need a little bit more information before I could tell you what we should do. But I feel completely differently now. Like, that, we just have to move faster. It's too important. And the phrase that I pull from, that I learned from also a wise guy, is the juice worth the squeeze? Is it worth it? Sometimes not. And that I have to remind myself. And it's funny too, because the more I do, the more I can see that in other people, and they're coming to me with like, well, we need to figure this out. And I'm able to be like, no, let's just go. Like, it's going to be okay. It's not, we've just got it. We don't have the time to figure all of that out. We can make it work. That's not worth that much effort in order to make this decision. And it's just so different from where I've come, that is progress for me.
Right. That's right. Well, speaking of, wise advice that we've received from mentors and sages in our experience, what would you say is the most impact? It doesn't necessarily have to be the best advice, but the advice that stuck with you the most in your career when it comes to, success as a leader, or success in business, or just quality of life? Like, what's the best advice you've ever received, or the advice that stuck with you the most?
I can think of like so many different examples.
We got time for a couple.
I'm not going to have a really cute soundbite about it, though.
Want to bet?
I think one of the most impactful things that I have learned in my career is going back to the people conversation about it's really just about the people.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to get so much further when you genuinely care about the people around you and helping each other out. So if you're just trying to make a sale, it's going to come across like you're trying to make a sale.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're trying to really like genuinely believe there's value in this for you, it's a completely different conversation. And that's in a sale, but that's also as a leader with your team and your coworkers and your customers and colleagues. I mean, anyone just genuinely caring about people and their experience and what it's like to work with you, I think. That's what matters. And when as we were talking, like when it's all just about people and do you want to work with them and do you want to see them succeed? And when you do, that's how this world works, I think.
You know, I was talking earlier about how I think that's really maybe it's a great existential like perspective on the impact of work, right? I really like, and that's a fabulous soundbite, by the way. You were wrong about that. That was a great soundbite. I don't know if it was cute, but it's wide.
I'll take it.
Yeah. Part of the bias that I bring into my work connecting people is for that reason, because I realize that we need people to kind of have an affinity for one another. And really what it is just shorthand. You know, you have people that have similar values or whatever, they just move faster. Because they already kind of know they're aligned, right? And where I tread lightly there is when your similar values are the wrong kind of things, or they're alienating to other people in ways they shouldn't be, right? But as long as they don't compromise, you know, kind of overall humane behaviors or whatever, I like to put people together who are going to move fast, and they move fast when they have a shorthand, when they the same way that you and I can communicate more easily because we both speak American English, right? Midwest American English or whatever, right? Like we don't have jargon. Like we're the same age, not the same age, but same generation or whatever. Sorry, I didn't mean to insult you.
Okay, I'm an Oregon Trail kid. I totally get it.
But you know what I mean? You're not 12, right? Like I'm not a 6-year-old. Right. Like those people would have different language than us, right? So that the shorthand is easier, right? And I feel like you move faster when there are a couple of concepts that you agree on and ideals or just different things kind of like energize you and motivate you, right? Part of my bias is because I know that the fit is going to make them more productive together, and they're going to crush goals and have a great working experience. But secretly, my sinister my real is for your kind of value system that you just explained, that at the end of the day, when we clock out, right? Like at the end of it all, what really matters is the interpersonal relationships and the big impact you have on one another, which is usually bigger than the companies that make the widgets and sell the services and whatever that we all work for and produce and whatever throughout our lives. It's usually an increment bigger than that. And so for that reason too, when you get people who you know are going to hear one another together for whatever reason, whether it's business or otherwise, something kind of great happens in friendships, marriages, family, working relationships, neighbors, whatever, all those little kind of roommates or whatever that become lifelong friends, those kind of things happen. And at the end of the day, there's no CFO measuring that. That is quality of life. Like that is like those are the biggest values that we can create, right? And they happen, fortunately for all of us, to coincide with, great energy that impacts great business outcomes. Too, right? So, anyway.
It's just a different mechanism where we apply it. That's all.
True. Thanks for sharing that. That's a good thought. I have 3 questions for you. Kind of what's your big goal? What's going to get in your way, and what are you going to do about it?
Yeah. So my big goal is really to facilitate those kinds of connections and drive real impact for the Air Force. So my big goal is connecting people to make those ideas happen and help to see them through into something real. So an idea is great, but I don't want to stop at an idea. I want to help turn it into a capability. And that's going to take those smart people continuing to work together. the other big goal is helping to build the workforce along the way, because if we don't do that, we're going to have a bunch of ideas that we can't take to fruition because we don't have the people to work on it. So
Okay.
connecting those two things, like that is the dream.
So are you doing something to help employers, the Air Force, universities find talent? Or
Yes.
okay,
So through the Digital Transformation Center, we are actively working to bring students into the center,
I feel you. Okay.
get them the training, connect them with employers for co-ops and internships
Nice.
and
Okay.
part-time employment. And then our big dream is that we can help that turn into an entry-level job.
Yeah.
And then we can continue some training and micro
Mhm.
certification and degree stacking, where they're continuing to learn, continuing to work with an organization.
Mhm.
But when they're ready to advance their career, they're in an ecosystem networking on the daily with other
Mhm.
employers who might be looking for that next level
Mhm.
talent. You're talking at the water cooler. You're
Yeah.
in this same event together. You're networking or showcasing your work just in your natural course of your day. You're
Mhm.
making those connections. So when they're ready for a mid-level, you've also been working your career and have access to the training that you can.
Mhm.
You're the person for that. You already know each other.
Mhm.
You know, you can take your career all the way up following that same kind of process. So we've got the industry innovators working with
Mhm.
the government to work on problems together, and then bringing the workforce in along the way
Mm.
and creating this perpetual engine that continues to fuel itself.
What's your big challenge gonna be?
Everything.
Everything. What
I
are you
think
most scared about
so
now?
much.
Right.
Well, there's a lot to figure out. We're at the very beginning
Okay.
stages
Yeah,
of
you're
what
just
we're
months
trying to
into
do.
it.
So
Yeah.
trying to gain momentum. I will say we've got a handful of industry and government people who are working with us who are
Okay.
super invested in what we're doing. And that brings so much energy into the space, because
Good.
we've got people who are willing to try and make that safe space for progress and
Mhm.
are just invested in the mission. So we really just want to expand that population, because there's so much of that in Dayton in particular.
Yeah, there's a lot. So the big challenge is gonna be getting more big contractors and getting more government
Yeah,
programs and officials engaged in bringing work, projects, and opportunity
that's part of
to the
it. I
center.
think there's a huge challenge in front of us just from a cultural perspective in this. We've got to move. We've got to move fast. There's a lot of people whose natural tendency to change is no, it won't work because this
Mhm.
is in the way. Stop. And we've got to break through that in order to make things happen. So we've got to not only come up with the idea and work together, but we've got to break through those barriers together, and we're going to hit them over and over and over again.
Earlier, you said you were gonna break some rules. I didn't wanna hear
That's
you.
not
I didn't wanna
that is
record any evidence that was gonna be
very against my nature. I am a rule follower. I told you I like process and details. So the fact that I'm sitting here and I'm excited and passionate about doing that and figuring out new ways to do it,
Mhm.
like that speaks to, I think, what we're trying to do. It's so important. And if I can break through that,
Yeah.
we can do this.
Well, I hear you. We have the shorthand now, Stacie. So like I hear you when you say that, and I know what you mean. What you mean is rewrite the rules.
Yes, I do, because there will be rules.
I heard you. I heard you.
Thank you.
Cool. This has been a great conversation. I appreciate you being on the show.
Yeah, thank
Thank you for
you.
coming.